If enough people leave a like on this video, at some point I will compel him to eat a raw onion.
How's it going, guys? This is the Civivi Knives Qubit, a small everyday carry knife with a couple of cool little features that I have been sent for review. Civivi contacted me in June and asked if I was interested in this knife. I saw a photo of it. I thought that looks like a pretty low risk review proposition, so all right. It's been a while between drinks and it had at that point, and it's still just getting back to making the contents, you know, so here we are. Now this knife here reminded me a little bit initially of my TRM Neutron. As you can see, it's about the same size dimensionally. It's also the same blade thickness pretty much. The materials are a bit different, the operation's a bit different, but it fills a similar role, a basic little EDC blade. These are obviously going to be fairly cost effective, being Civivi knives, but they're still made very well out of really good materials. Seriously, the days of rubbish, under $50 knives, poorly assembled in HCR 13 MOV are long gone now. This is a pretty premium feeling bit of kit, despite, when you know the price tag, you realize, well, it ain't, but it's still nice. And so I thought, yep, I'll give that a crack, and have been pretty happy with it for the last week or so that I have been testing it. So what do you get for your money? You get an aluminium handle with some nice sort of smooth contoured scales. You get a button lock, which is nice. Button locks are getting more and more common, which is a cool thing, I suppose. I like a button lock. Sometimes they can get a bit sticky and a bit sort of clicky and whatnot, but this one, pretty good. Slight sort of tactile grab when you first push it. It falls in quite nicely. The knife operates obviously very smoothly. You do have a thumb stud on this one as well that you can also use for your deployment. A little bit like, a little bit different, I suppose, to the Civivi button locks. Button locking Elementum, which the only way you can open it is by pressing the lock, and in fact when the button isn't pressed and it's shut, it locks the knife shut as well. So that's kind of a true two-way button lock. This guy here is just a one-way button lock, so you can certainly open the knife without it. I noticed in the blade there's a little bit of a cutout for the back of the button lock to go, which was an interesting way of doing it, I guess. I hadn't seen that before, but there you go. It doesn't affect or impede the blade in any way. It's just an interesting little nook or divot you see when you stare down the guts of the knife. So there's that. And yeah, the blade is in 14C28N, which seems to be one of Civivi's go-to sort of budget line steels. That and Nitro V, which are also in the same sort of family or triad of steels, very similarly chemically, and yeah, very good performers by all accounts. I'll show you a little bit of a edge test on this knife here after my initial bit of talking is done. So it has a deep carry pocket clip, and the knife comes in at a pretty low weight. I'll just put the specs up on the screen because if I say them out loud, I'll probably fudge them, and I haven't got a sheet of paper with them all written down. So let's talk specs and let's show it against some other knives, and then we'll move on to the testing and the reviewing and the comments about how it works. So pretty unsurprisingly, the steel performed well for a steel in this price range. The 14C28N always is a complete dream to sharpen. It takes a really nice, fine, sticky, well-polished edge with pretty minimal sharpening, repetition. It's a little bit to get the edge set, and then just polished it up with a few increments of stones. I didn't even strop it, I just did the old, that guy there, and it was a super sharp, really fine edge, and it still is really, it's lost that, absolute bleeding paper slicing sharpness. And it did 250 cuts before it got there, which is about half the course for an upper level, good stainless type steel that's obviously been sharpened to not with tickets on myself, but a pretty good edge. Like, I'm not the best sharper in the world, but yeah, that's about the right performance. Obviously, steels like S35VN and S110V, anything that's powdered is going to go a fair bit more than any sort of more standard steel. But yeah, in general terms, for a budget-ish knife with a budget-ish steel, pretty good result. So happy with that, absolutely. So as a user, there's an interesting little bit that they kind of describe this open tang here being a bottle opener, which I'm always a bit, cynical about additions like that on knives. And yeah, sure enough, it's not the best bottle opener. It will open a bottle. It took me, a few goes to get it on basically every time. You have to because it's thin, you have to work your way around the cap. But yeah, I mean, if you need a pop top bottle opener and all you have is your knife and you don't want to use the edge of a table or something, then yeah, it'll absolutely be a little hook that'll grab and lift a cap. Most of the bottles here are in fact twist tops, and I haven't really seen a pop top in Australia for a fair while, but there you have it. It'll do that for sure. Just be aware though, the aluminium handle will scuff up if you do that. Any sort of hard, scratchy thing against this handle material, and the anodization will eventually cause it to age and develop something of a Boba Fett effect, as my buddy Tony over at Everyday Commentary sort of refers to it as. And yeah, you might like that. That might be a part of your knife use you enjoy, the knife gradually getting knocks and dings and whatnot. And aluminium is certainly going to do that quicker than most other sort of handle materials. I like it how it is finished in this sort of pristine, fairly new sense, but even this one is starting to get a couple of little tarnishes on it, but so be it. All I'm saying is if you use it as your primary bottle opener, you'll have a lot of silver around this hooky end here, that's for sure. The blade is thin, the blade is slicey, it is a tall flat grind, again fairly similar to the TRM Atom in how the blade performs day to day. The steel on the TRM Atom is going to last about 3 times longer with the same edge, as my testing, if my memory's correcting me correctly, about 600 passes for a steel like this versus the 250-ish on the Nitro, on the 14C28N here. So, you're going to pay about 3 times to 4 times as much for a knife like this as well, which is going to be American made with a sort of 3D milled micarta handle and the CPM 20 CV steel. So you know what? Everything increases with cost, often including the quality and the prestige, I suppose, of American manufacturer, if that's a thing that tickles you. It doesn't really bother me as much the place things are manufactured, but this one definitely does perform on a longer term sense before it needs a revisit to the sharpening bench, and I do appreciate that. In terms of if I was just blind cutting with both, I prefer the handle of the TRM a little bit more to squeeze, wrap my fingers around and go for it, but really pressing each knife through material, they perform and cut about as well as each other, because frankly, they're very similar blade shapes of about identical stock thickness. So there you have it, really good. The deep carry pocket clip is absolutely fine, again fairly similar to the TRM, and it leaves a tiny little bit of the knife out of your pocket for you to grab, but whilst keeping the knife a little bit secret, a little bit safe in your pocket before you get it out. So that's why I like a deep carry pocket clip, and does well at that job.
It's pooping time.
Look, overall, it's hard. What do you say about knives? Nick did a really good video the other day that just being excellent is the basic standard in knives now. It's really hard to review stuff unless it's openly bad with openly shit design choices, which of course this has none of. I mean, look at it. It's a very basic pattern of knife, really, isn't it? It's got the extra little oddity, I suppose, of the bottle opener thing, which I tend to just ignore anyway. It's got a button lock, which is a newish sort of new trend, I guess. Button locks, they've really taken off once again, so it's kind of on pulse with that. But really, there is nothing bad to say about most knives anymore that you can get for, unless you're paying less than $30 for a knife, it's probably even going to have like a really good steel as well. It's a good time to be in the knife hobby, and companies like Civivi and Concept and all of the overseas companies, they really are flooding the market with a whole bunch of varied and wacky and wild designs. Some of them are definitely not for me, but anything that you see like this that's pretty safe is going to be a pretty safe buy, and I'm happy to sort of take that to the bank. I mean, you look at the Elementum, it's kind of a bit of a meme at the moment, or it was, about how everyone just shat themselves over this knife. This was probably like the new rat number 2 of knives. Like, it was just that ubiquitous, everyone likes it, universally popular, but a little bit plain sort of knife. Hey, have you heard about the Civivi button lock Elementum? Was kind of the running gag between knife nerds. So that's kind of the state of the industry at the moment. Everything is good, and the hardest thing to do is to find stuff that's really great and exciting, and that's sort of where I'm a bit stuck in the knife game as well. Excite me with something. When I find something that works, I repeat it. I did see they do a fixed blade that looks like a buck 119 kind of thing, so I'm going to see if I can maybe play with one of those, because that actually excited me. That looks cool, and that's just from Civivi. But in general terms, hard to find stuff that really gets me psyched at the moment, because everything is just so done basically good. And what a spoilt time we live in if that's something that we openly kind of bemoan in our knife review videos. But there you have it. So look, overall, I would of course recommend the Civivi Qubit. Absolutely, if you've got a bit of cash to spare, if you like to just buy a knife of the week, this could absolutely be your knife of the week. I'm not sure if this will ever be someone's favorite knife. I don't know, like, does that happen anymore at all anyway? I mean, I have a favorite knife, this one here, but I think that's because it's a slight bit more bespoke or a slight bit more prestigious. It's probably all just nonsense bouncing around up in my head. Sort of knife identity nonsense rather than anything. Because frankly, if I gave this knife to someone and gave this knife to someone who didn't know anything about steel, they'd probably not be able to tell the difference. They might not even quantify that they're sharpening this one slightly less than this one, you know? So really, as a knife geek, it's a funny time to be doing it, because basically everything is good, including the Qubit. So I'll see you all in the next film. Goodbye.